It's great to be up here again in front of you all, and I pray that God blesses the words that I speak this morning, and we all collectively go away having heard something and be changed from that. I'm going to start with a Bible verse or chapter, a very familiar one, 1 Corinthians chapter 13. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am only a resounding gong or a clanging cymbal. If I have the gift of prophecy and can fathom all mysteries and all knowledge, and I have faith that can move mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I give all I possess to the poor and surrender my body to the flames, but have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud. It is not rude, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered. It keeps no records of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, and always perseveres. A woman was taking a nap one afternoon, and she woke up and told her husband, I just had this great dream where you bought me a diamond necklace. What do you think it means? She asked her husband. The husband replied, you'll find out this evening. That evening, the man came home with a small package, nicely wrapped, and gave it to his wife. She was delighted. She tore open the wrapping paper, and inside she found a book entitled The Meaning of Dreams. Two big events happened to me this week. One of them I think you can probably guess. The other one may be a little bit more tricky. The first, more obvious one is Valentine's Day. Something that is around us in all the shops, in all the media. We see it everywhere. I think through my life, it's probably grown in seemingly importance or razzmatazz. There seems to be more attached to it now than forever when I was younger. The expectation of more gifts or bigger things, flowers, cards, diamond necklaces, whatever it might be. But do you know the history of Valentine's Day? I looked up this on the internet, so bear with me. So apparently it came from a Roman priest in the 3rd century. Emperor Claudius II had banished and refused to let people get married because single men made better fighters than married men with children. So he said, no one's getting married anymore. Let's keep people single so we have a better fighting army. But a priest named Valentine, apparently, thought this was unfair. So he's used to, behind the scenes in the quiet, marry people so that they could be married. And of course, he got found out and sent to prison. And in prison, again, so it told me on the internet, he fell in love with the jailer's daughter. And he used to write to her letters signed from your Valentine. So apparently that's the history of it. Then Romans celebrated that as a spring festival on the 15th of February, and in the Christian calendar it moved to the 14th of February to cherish Saint Valentine. In the Middle Ages, people used to recite poetry to one another, and obviously now we write cards and buy flowers and do all sorts of other things. Vaguely interesting, but not important. Let's get right back to chapter 13. So you're all familiar, I'm sure, but there are 4 types of love expressed in the Greek, and what we're hearing about here, and it's translated back to the English, is just one. the word love. The 4, there's the eros, the passionate, the romantic love, the one I guess we celebrate on Valentine's Day. But God also created us to be in friendship with people, to have friends around us, and that's a different kind of love, a friendship called philos. Storge, and again I'm probably mispronouncing those, so apologies. You can look these up later. My Greek's not great. Family love, the love between parents and children, brothers and sisters, siblings, nieces, uncles, whatever you are. That's a different kind of love. And the 4th, agape, which I'm sure a lot of you know. That self-giving, sacrificial, unconditional kind of love. And it's the love that we read in chapter 13. I really like the way Paul describes it in this letter. It's action. It's not about a feeling or an emotion. You know, again, Valentine's Day, you hear about sort of love and the feelings of butterflies in your stomach, whatever else. This is not like that at all. This is very much talking about putting things into action or not putting things into action. So let me just read again for you, starting in verse 4 in chapter 13. Love is patient, love is kind. It does not envy, it does not boast. It is not proud, it is not rude. It is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered. It keeps no records of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. So you see there, putting those things into action. And note, as we read right to the bottom, the word always crept in, just to make it that little bit more difficult. Always protects. Not most of the time, quite often, but always. Always trusts. Not when I'm feeling like it or on a Wednesday, but always. Always hopes, always perseveres. And when we read the Bible and we understand Jesus, I think we can look at him and compare him with these words, how this is framed in this verse. Jesus was patient. He was kind. He was not easily angered. He did not boast. He always was trustworthy. He always persevered. That's the Jesus I read about. That's the Jesus I know. That he is there. He meets all of those criteria. But then I put my own name in there to see how I do. Let me have a look. Tim is patient. Maybe. You can talk to Jill about that and see what she says. I bet she'll say maybe sometimes. Tim is kind. Like to think so, but not always. And I could read on, and I don't compare too well. So as we sail through Valentine's Day and start looking towards Mothering Sunday or Easter in the calendar, perhaps it's a good time for us to pause and reflect. At the start of the year, a lot of people think about how they did last year and what they're planning to do in the forthcoming year. Perhaps they want to get fit, lose weight. I don't know. The gym certainly got busier in January, I would say. Noticeably busier, at least for the first 2 or 3 weeks. And then on the frosty mornings, I noticed there was a few less people there, or it was raining, and you could see the numbers dropping off quite quickly. I, foolishly, at work, had volunteered and said, I'll sign up to the half marathon that a few people are organising. I'm not sure now. It's February. I'm thinking about it. And am I going to make it? I don't know. I went for the first run this morning. I'm still standing, but we'll see. It certainly wasn't anywhere near a half marathon length. And then we get into spring. Spring's a time of emptying our cupboards, tidying the house, apparently sorting things out. It's that kind of season where we might be doing that. Perhaps Valentine's Day is a good point for us to stop, reflect back on chapter 13 and see how we're doing. See, are we stepping into those things that are described here? As I said, I don't think I do particularly well, but perhaps God's asking me to push a little bit harder and deeper into some of those attitudes, some of those actions or non-actions that perhaps I should be focused on. I said at the start there were 2 big events this week. Hopefully you haven't been pondering all that time while I've been talking, thinking, what was the other one? I wonder what the other one is. Tim's going to ask me in a minute. Any ideas what the other big event in my life was? This is a lot more tricky. Birthday? No birthdays. Birthday's coming up. My dog and Gavin, both on the same day. My son-in-law, both on the same day. It's coming up soon. Anniversary? No.
Had a baby?
I haven't had a baby that I know about, Mike. No. Just going to clarify that. No, so I didn't think you'd guess it. It was actually our company's annual results day. So very, very dull. Apologies. But it's a point of measure. It's a point where the work that I've been doing and the colleagues around me have been doing are publicised to the world to see how the company's done. Now, I'm not saying that what I've done individually really affects the grand scheme of everything that we do, but I guess the collective of all the people that work with me, if you sum all that up, the end result of that is the numbers and the metrics and the things that we describe in our annual report that are published to everybody to look at. Why is that important? Well, it's not really that important. I don't get too excited about it. I have to listen to people talk about it, a lot of work, and it has effect. But it does affect some of the things. If we do well, the company does different things. It says, yes, spend more money, do some more projects, go off and do this and that. If we don't do so well, they think about contracting or changing things. So it has an impact. I also notice really acutely that we're watched from the outside. There's a lot of people interested in what I do, well, what we collectively do as an organisation. And I don't really understand it. We're a company owned by shareholders, so they've got an interest. They want to know how their share is doing. But the financial market is a very, very confusing place. And I don't really get it. Sometime a quarter goes by and we don't do very well, and our share price goes up. I don't really understand why. And sometimes we do very well and our share price goes down. And I don't understand why. And I'm not sure, some people I'm sure do, but I don't really understand why that happens. Often I think it's more about sentiment and feelings and emotions and what people say in the press about us or other things that are happening in the global world that we live in. Maybe they're affecting those kind of things. I don't know. And I probably should know more. I probably should delve into the accounts. I'm sure, Mike, you probably understand some of the balance sheet and some of the words and numbers, but it doesn't make any sense to me. There's different acronyms and EBITDA and stuff that it's just words and numbers, and they don't ever seem to quite add up correctly, and there's funny tax adjustments over here and something over there. And my dad was an accountant, so you'd think, Tim, you probably really should get into that and understand it more. That should be sort of one of those family traits that's passed down. No, not at all. He still keeps a sort of book and logs off what he spends on different things in his bank statement. No, don't do that, I'm afraid. So, no, I'm not really interested. But I do realise that we're really looked at. People are observing what we're doing from the outside, and we're measured very closely. Why does that matter? Well, it affects what happens this year. So our strategy, where are we heading? What things are we going to do more of? What things are we going to do less of? And in fact, we didn't have a very good year, so that our CEO has said, we're going to have a reset of our strategy. We're going to change course, change direction. We're going somewhere. And we find out later this month where there is. And I don't know, honestly don't know where it is. It might be very different. It might be slightly different or very similar. I don't know. We'll find out like everybody else on that day. But it's important. The strategy and where we head affects me, I guess, as an employee. I want to be thinking I'm doing something that I'm part of, I'm aligned to. So, a long discussion about company performance. How does that fit into chapter 13 that we read at the start? It's a very good question. Very good question. To me, when I read chapter 13 in Corinthians, it's really, really clear what God is saying. Once you get the agape part out the way, it's pretty clear what God is saying. In Paul's letter, it's a very straight list of things that we should do and that we shouldn't do. So when I read that, I start to worry that I'm not doing a very good job. We reflect on it and perhaps we think, actually I'm not really doing very well. And it's all about action, isn't it? As we talked about, that agape love, stepping into those things. The good news is Jesus was there before us. He's cracked all this stuff. He lived that perfect life, aligned to all of those things. And so whatever I don't do, however I measure up or don't measure up, it doesn't matter. I'm still going to be valued by God. He's still going to love me exactly as I am. But because he knows what's best for me and for all of us, he's given us these things to help us, to guide us, to inform us about how we should and shouldn't do things. Because he knows best. He can see everything and he knows perfectly what's the right thing for me and for the people around me. And if I live by these things, it will be good for me and for those people I am close to. Let me give you an analogy. We've got our grandchildren here today, which is absolutely lovely, a real blessing. They're fidgets, particularly Jude, a real fidget. Can't sit still on a chair at all for any length of time. You put him in a chair, he's already sort of standing up, walking around, sitting down, twiddling his bottom, leaning over, and often he falls over. He falls off the chair, or the whole chair falls over, or he bangs his head on the table. He banged his head on the table twice yesterday while having lunch with us out at Stansted. It's just what happens. And I can tell him, Jude, don't fidget, because you're going to bump your head or you're going to fall over. And he might sit still for a second, 2 seconds if I'm lucky, and then he'll be off fidgeting again, because that's how he is. He's just fidgeting. But because I can see, and I can see the bigger picture, I know that it's not good for him to be leaning back on the chair or swinging on it, because I know ultimately there's a fairly good chance, that he will fall off and hurt himself. And it happens regularly. And this is the same with God. He knows what's best for us. He knows, and he's helping through the Bible, and as we're talking about chapter 13 here in 1 Corinthians, he knows what's right for us and what makes us better. But it's for us to step into that. Obviously, though, we're not measured. So unlike the world of work, God is not keeping tabs on us. We don't have an annual review with God telling us how we've done, scoring us, marking us, saying, well, Tim, do you remember that time last year? Didn't quite do your right thing there, did you? Remember this? We don't have that. At work, absolutely. That's what happens. I have a review every year and we talk about the things I did well or didn't do quite so well, things I should improve on, extra training I should have. We don't live in that world with God. God doesn't keep track of all the things we do and don't do. This last few months has been quite difficult at work. I've been very, very busy, and on Thursday had to get up early for 2 important meetings that I'd arranged with some people in India. So I agreed I'd get up early and meet with them. So I set my alarm, got up, joined the call at 5 a.m. They didn't turn up. And then I had another call with some other people in the same office a bit later at 6 o'clock. They didn't turn up either. So by 7 o'clock, when I had my next meeting with a couple of colleagues, they were like, Tim, you seem a little bit grumpy. Yeah, I'm a little bit grumpy today. And we explained about it. That happens all the time. I don't live up to these measures day in, day out. I know I should do, but I can't. But God isn't keeping count. Today is a new day, a new opportunity to step into those things. Thirdly, then, unlike any company strategy, trying to keep the shareholders happy, the employees happy, the government, the media, whatever else companies try to do. I can tell you this morning that God's strategy is the best. He's got it planned out. He knows what's happening. Our strategy, as I said, is probably going to change on the 28th or whenever this week coming. God's strategy isn't. In fact, it hasn't changed. This verse, these verses that we read, these things that Paul has said in this letter, explaining how we should be, are the same at the beginning of time, and they'll be the same at the end of time. They're not going to change. The rules don't change just to satisfy something or to move something around. Dave last week spoke to us about sort of Revelation and the sort of end times. Very complicated, I must admit. It's a complicated thing, and hopefully what you took away from that, you may have disagreed with bits of it, you may have agreed with bits of it, but maybe it just pointed you and you thought, actually, I'm going to study a bit more about that. Great. Really important. As Dave said, his views had changed, so our views may change or maybe not, and that's absolutely fine. Important that we do some digging, but God's strategy is solid, absolutely solid, never changing. It's never going to move. What it says here in 1 Corinthians 13 is true now and will always be true. The fourth difference between a company, or in fact anything in the world that we see around us, any organisation that we see, whether it's a charity, even churches, there's sort of layers and tiers of organisation that humans build into things. The company I work in is quite a large company, so it has actually not as many tiers as probably people imagine, but there are tiers of organisational structure that exist. We use Teams, Microsoft Teams. Doesn't really matter, but we can use that to look at our calendars, to send instant messages to people, to annoy them, to hold all our files. But nicely, what you can do is click on someone's name, and you can see who they work for or who works for them, which is interesting, but it's actually super useful. In a big company, it's sometimes really hard to find the person that you want to talk to in a different site or a different place. So I can navigate around and click on somebody. And I was doing this the other day with somebody, and we went right to my CEO because this person we think was in a completely other part of the company. So I clicked on him and started navigating around. And what I didn't realise was I'd actually started an instant message chat with my CEO. Easy to do, apparently. Luckily, I didn't write anything down, and obviously that was fortunate, and I'm sure he wasn't checking either anyway. But we have these structures and organisations we build into it. Everywhere I look, there's structures, organisation, hierarchies. God's kingdom is the flattest organisation you could ever be in and will ever be in. There is us, and there is God. That is it. That is it. There's nothing else in between. God and us. So I'm having a bad day and I need to get hold of my boss to ask him a question. I send him an email, phone him up. Maybe he'll respond, maybe he won't. If it's someone more senior, could take weeks to get an answer. Not with God. At any point, day and night, if I have a worry, a concern, I need an answer. God is there for me. It is absolutely that simple. Our senior leaders in the organisation say quite often we'll say, I've got an open door policy. Basically the context that their office is wide open and that you can walk in at any time, virtually nowadays, because very few people actually have offices. With God, his door truly is always open. He wants to hear from us at any point, all the time. We sometimes have town halls at work where a senior person would present, normally again on Teams, but sometimes face-to-face, to the part of the company they're responsible for, or even all of the company. And I went to one quite a few years ago with our old CEO. And at the end he said, is there any questions in the audience? Which is a brave thing to ask for someone that senior, I think, you know. And a few people were brave enough to ask some questions. I didn't. But my favourite part of that was a lady stood up and she had a whole list of questions that she wanted to ask the CEO. A whole list. It wasn't a scroll, but I remember it like it was a scroll, like she stood up and it sort of fell to the floor and she said, right, number one. And she was off, and he couldn't stop her. It was very interesting. Slightly embarrassing for the lady, I think, but it was funny. We've got direct access to God. We have direct access to God. So, Tim, what should I take away from today? Well, can I suggest that we remember that Valentine's Day, not the history part, but just as a point in time, is useful to point us back to passages like the one we read at the start. Not to beat ourselves up with, I'm not doing very well, but to remember that God has put this there to guide us of how we should live. And perhaps challenge us to try and pick up on that. Perhaps this week spend time in God's company. Ask him, God, please prompt me this week in situations I find myself up. When I'm up at 5 o'clock listening, waiting for someone to join a meeting and they don't turn up. God, help me to be gracious in that situation. Help me to be different when I bump into somebody, when someone ruffles me. When, as Liz said, when we see someone in need, God, remind me to stop, to pray for them, to help them. Agape love is an action. So I pray that this week you will ask God for opportunities to demonstrate that love that he asks us to. Let me close in prayer. Lord God, I do not want to be just a clanging cymbal. Help me to put the teachings in this passage into practice, into daily effect in my life, so that I can be a better witness for you and to change the lives of the people around me. Amen.